DNA of the soul.
Welcome, I'm your host Kenny, and you're listening to Social Sleuth. You know the drill, we're back to yap. Today we are joined by Sydney, the creator behind Bloody Brilliant Books, and we're going to talk all things BookTok.
Drum roll, please. Can anybody guess?
Welcome, Sydney, to Social Sleuth. Thanks for coming. And I guess to get into it, we can go into the literature later, but what is your experience with the digital space?
I started my channel in 2023, mostly just because I am a huge book nerd. So I decided that I would give it a try because I've always wanted to be like more of a professional reviewer, I guess. Not that I would say that like BookTok is like a professional space. It is very unhinged sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. I have met so many really nice people from literally all over the world, which is super fun. Like I have people I actively talk to from obviously the States and Germany and the UK. Like it's a lot of fun. There's definitely obviously drama and some controversy because books tend to be inherently political, but I love it. I would never go back.
I guess you kind of got into a little bit, but what got you into creating content, that piece of wanting to review and curate?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I was doing a little bit of research and I saw that BookTube, like on YouTube, was a thing before. Were you aware of that?
I was aware. I'm not a big YouTube person. I like the short form videos instead. I just found that YouTube felt a little daunting to be like over 10 minutes, 15, 20 to start with videos and stuff like that. And honestly, I can rant about a book, but they can tend to get repetitive when I'm reviewing. So I feel like 2-3 minutes is just what I need to like talk about something.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about the time frame. Yeah. And then I saw that you're really diligent with captions on your videos, which I love to see. And also warning about sensitive content in books as well. That's something you're obviously doing, but do you think that's something that the BookTok community is doing? Is it a fairly inclusive space?
I think so. I mean, there's a lot of people who come under fire pretty recently. Like there was some drama on Threads the other day about an author who was talking about how can you have like a happily ever after without sex? And a lot of people in like the asexual community too spoke out, and lots of people defended them and had their backs too, because that's just not what like BookTok or even like reader spaces should be about, in my opinion. I have met so many great people who are so good about making sure that they hit their triggers when they're talking about something and just warning people of like what content is going to be in what. Because obviously there is a darker side, like darker romance, that a lot of people consume that kind of media, which personally I enjoy it, but I can see that it could be jarring for a lot of people or anybody who has similar experiences than what's in the book. So I find that especially recently, authors have been really great about giving trigger warning lists, or at least giving readers the tools and resources to find that information, just so that they know exactly what they're getting into. And there's a lot of like author's notes too. You'll see that it's like your mental health comes first. So if you have issues with this content, like don't read this kind of thing. So I feel like there's a lot of less. When I read books that are from more the early 2000s, you just don't get that kind of like treatment, and trigger warnings are basically non-existent. So I think content warnings are just so important, and it's one of like my main things with a book. Like I will stop reading a book if there's no content warning. I don't personally have any triggers, but I know so many people, and I think it's so bad to not tell people what they're getting into when you're going to have such sensitive content, especially when some of the themes covered is always like essay and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You need to know.
Absolutely.
So
that's a really good point. Sort of like the BookTok content creators like yourself, sort of pulling from authors and the changes that they're making and sort of making that public. And then some authors are maybe a bit behind on that.
Yes, I definitely think that some authors are behind on that. It is getting a lot better, though. There's obviously still controversy with some topics and what is okay in a book and what is not okay in a book, because obviously books historically, like erotica and like sexuality in books has been there since as long as literature has been written. So I actually took a class when I was in university, and it was called like Sexting Through the Ages, and it just went through like different periods and how the erotica like manifested in different eras. It was actually a lot of fun, but it was really eye-opening because these topics have always been there. So it's really nice seeing in like more of a modern sphere that we're actually talking about what's in it. There was an author that wrote a book not that long ago. She was a problem anyway, and I'm not going to name any names, but she wrote a book, and it was an age gap romance with like her dad's friend, but the dad was like the friend was attracted to her since she was 3, and there was a huge uproar because obviously that just lays on the side of pedophilia. So and so it's very clearly that like when there are lines, they are drawn and they are very dark. So it's very clear like what's okay and what's not, like what's taboo and what's just criminal. Yeah.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be that line.
She actually got arrested.
Yeah.
In
That adds up.
Australia.
And kind of some of the other stuff we're talking about, I think the content warnings and talking about things can also be a way for authors to make sure that they can still express the ideas that they want to, that can be maybe sensitive to some viewers, but as long as they're forthcoming with it, then it protects them in that way of having this freedom of expression and creativity. I don't know if it's with fiction books as much, but does the banning of books ever come up in sort of the content that you're reading?
Yes. So book bans, obviously, with the current climate in America, is something that's on the top of a lot of people's minds. Amazon recently made a move. So I don't know how familiar you are with book platforms and like Amazon platforms, because Amazon has a very strong monopoly over ebooks. So indie authors tend to publish through Amazon because it's so accessible to them. But when you publish with Amazon, they have like I think it's either 6 months or a year monopoly on that book. So you can't publish it anywhere else if you've published it with Amazon. And recently they've changed their platform. So you used to be able to download the ebook onto your computer, and then you could transfer via like USB-C onto your Kindle, or if you were like somebody who converts books and puts them on your Kobo, you could do that. In February, they moved away from that. So you're no longer allowed to actually download the book onto your device. It just goes into your Kindle library. So I don't know if you know the connotation of that, but for me and a lot of other readers, that is very suspect because they do it under the guise of stopping pirating and theft, but it feels more like they're taking away content so that if they decide to delete something from the Amazon library or like the Amazon catalog, it just disappears.
Yeah, you don't.
So you don't, and you don't, it's not when you're buying books on Amazon, like ebooks, you're basically leasing the right to read it, but you've still paid for the right to read it. So that was very like suspicious in that nature, just the fact and the timing of making that change. So there's been a lot of talk about banning books, especially we call it open door romance versus like closed door romance. There's a lot of controversy surrounding different verbiage used for that, but we tend to avoid like clean romance because it gives the connotation that anything that does contain sex is like dirty or wrong. So open door romance, I think, is mostly in danger because there's a lot of rhetoric surrounding women and sexuality and how they just don't. Women aren't allowed to have things, basically, is what I'm saying. So a lot of authors are worried about what that's going to look like in the next few months, even, and as opposed to like how that's going, I guess. If that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting to think about what different types of books. It's not just one type of political book or one type of whatever content, that it's even coming into fiction, which is like a creative space that people are expressing themselves or maybe talking about deeper topics through fiction. So I think that's really bad. That's scary and sad, especially for indie artists that are like using these platforms to probably get picked up and get traction. Let's see what else. How has BookTok benefited you or changed your reading habits, if any?
Oh my gosh. I well, now I don't have any other hobbies.
Okay.
Because I've basically turned it into a second job. I actually recently had to download a app to help me manage posts because I'm on BookTok, but I'm also trying to get onto like Bookstagram a little bit more. And I find that Meta, it's just a much harder algorithm to kind of figure out because it's less random than TikTok. So I read a lot more, and I have found so many indie authors on BookTok. So it just has made that media so much more accessible in the way of marketing. Like, it gives authors a platform to market themselves a little bit better, I think, especially with the whole short form video, because obviously I think everyone's a little ADHD in that sense, that it's really hard to focus in. And also, people aren't like looking for recommendations the same way that they used to. I remember when I was younger going into bookstores and they would have like Heather's picks and stuff like that. That doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Who is Heather? I don't know. I don't care what she likes. So actually being able to see and engage with people and see what they like to read and kind of hear their sales pitch has changed my habits, because I add so many, like I have thousands of books on my TBR. So I'll never finish it, but it's made it so much more accessible to actually talk about it and figure out, because sometimes you don't have big readers in your friend group or in your life. Like, I'm very lucky that my family is pretty big on reading and stuff too. But before that, like probably when I was like in my early 20s, the only time I would read something was like authors I recognized. So I feel like it has just made it so much more accessible for me to find authors that I never would have thought of looking for before.
That's so awesome. Yeah, that's great. Do you think it's a community type of space on the internet? Yeah.
100%.
You're saying that you talk to so many people from all over the place.
So many. And there's lots of like back and forth engagement. And even just talking to authors is really cool. Like, I did an author interview a couple months ago with a girl who wrote her first like dark fantasy book that got trad published, and that was a lot of fun. It's so, and it gets your name out there too with like publishers. So it's just so much easier to actually engage in like author events. And I also think there's been a huge resurgence in reading because of these like book spaces and reader spaces.
Absolutely. Like, I published this podcast and some writing on Substack, and there's this switch and this desire for print media over digital media. So I think it's really neat to be taking something like TikTok, a digital space, and bringing attention to that print, because it's so important. It's something we can actually hold. And like you said, it can't just be deleted. Okay. These are more of like the larger benefits, which maybe is too deep for book talk, but maybe it is what's happening. Had like a stat of the views of going from 30 billion to 82 billion for hashtag book talk in like just over a year. So it's obviously growing. You said you started in 2023.
Yeah, I started my channel in February 2023, and engagement is still kind of hard sometimes. I feel like it's easier to kind of amass followers than it is to find people who are like actively engaging in your content. The TikTok algorithm can kind of be complicated, but there is so many creators and so much. I know so many people who are like, that's their actual job now, is they just create content for BookTok, because there's just, and even, I don't know if you've been into a bookstore recently, but there's been like a huge resurgence in actually printing and like formats too. Like, books are getting printed with sprayed edges and beautiful, and it's very different from like even 5 years ago. I would have never imagined that that was happening. Like, book subscription boxes are 2-year wait lists now. Like, I think that aspect of the internet has just really stimulated the market. And I think that you can kind of attribute some of it to COVID as well, because a lot of people started reading again when we were locked down. I think that kind of gave a lot of people an opportunity to think about it a bit more, because we all were kind of forced to slow down our lives. So I kind of like attribute it around those time frames, because I know a lot of creators who started around that time are the ones who are very big creators now. I'm definitely like a smaller channel. So, but yeah, honestly, it's growing every day too. And you can see even just in like this weekend is a Polycon. I don't know. If you know what that is, it's a big book expo. I believe it's in Washington, D.C., and it's run by Jennifer L. Armentrout. It's huge. It's probably the biggest book event like yearly, but there's so many other ones that are like popping up too. And there's just so many more of those things happening now, like those opportunities. And they've also spurred like, I don't know if you've seen any of those like fantasy balls that people are doing and such. You can see it manifesting. So it doesn't surprise me to see that kind of exponential growth rate because it just manifests in literally everything. You can see so much like finding media and books, and like bookstores are opening up. They're not closing as much anymore. And especially throughout, like I've seen it throughout Canada, but I've seen it globally. Like every time I travel, like romance only bookstores are also opening, which is a little crazy.
Yeah.
So
it's just everywhere, like so many different things. I guess you kind of also touched on a bit of how books are getting prettier and the print is getting taken more seriously or romanticizing just reading. Do you see any negatives to that? We've talked about some of the positives. When I was reading online, people were saying, oh, these people have these books and they don't even read them, and all of this sort of cattiness, I think, about it.
You get a lot of that, I think, where people are like, oh, you buy more books than you can read and stuff like that. And that's true. I have a literal library at my house. I have over 1,000 books. I have read all of them, though. And that's just a collection that I've been collecting since I was like 11, right? So, I mean, I'm 28, so it's been a while.
Takes time.
There is a little bit of like a cattiness, but for the most part, if you're actually in the community engaging with people, it's kind of a bit of a joke where we like, oh, our TBRs are so long, but we go and buy a bunch of new books anyway, because buying books and reading books are two different hobbies, in my opinion. So collecting books and like that aesthetic side of it is very different than actually reading books. Like I have 2 different e-readers and I prefer to actually read electronically now. It's just more, it's easier to travel with it. It's easier to, like, I can read in my elevator if I have my Kobo or my Kindle. So I think that you'll see a little bit of people being like, oh, like, why are you buying so many books? But for the most part, it's more of a, like, it's a joke. So we talk about the books that we buy and it's like, it's kind of like a funny thing where it's like, oh, I have 300 physical books that I have to read, but I just bought 10 more. Stuff like that. So it's not, if you see people who are talking about it in that sense, they're likely not actually a part of the community.
Yeah, like me watching from the outside.
Exactly, totally.
And I was seeing fun things about rebuilding the trope and sort of reclaiming that, which I think is just so fun. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's been in the past couple years for sure that I've seen us like talking more about tropes in books and kind of accepting them. I think for a long time, talking about tropes, people would be like, oh, they're overdone. Like, and they'd kind of get a little frustrated with the concept of a trope. Like if you were talking about like love triangles and stuff like that, be like, okay, well, it's the same in every book. Like all of these books do this. But really, I think for myself, I am not a blind reader. I do not like to go into a book not knowing what it's about. It actually drives me crazy. Like I always read the synopsis. And I like to have like a little bit of like background information on what I'm about to read too. This goes along with reading a lot of like advanced copies and review copies because I don't like to review things negatively. So I tend to stay on the side of things that I'm going to like. So if you ever look at my channel, you'll see I review books very highly, but that's only because I'm looking for books that I'm actively going to enjoy. So I like research what I'm going to read first a little bit, and then I'll create like a TBR for the month based off of like the books that I need to review and the books that I actually like I'm really excited about. So I think that having the tropes, it gives you like a small short form sales pitch. So if you were, for example, like I'm looking through books, I'm like, okay, I really feel like I want to read a cowboy romance, single dad romance, like just finding those little like bits and like knowing what you like. And it gives you such a easier like to branch off and find books that you maybe wouldn't have thought of before because they're marketing them by trope.
Yeah. People know what to expect. You want something that you know that you'll enjoy or at least somewhat enjoy.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean that it's all going to be the same. And I think that's where people kind of get confused is just because something has the same trope, you're going to get a whole different story because the author is telling something different. They've just put in an aspect that is commonly used. It's just a literary device at the end of the day.
Yeah, sort of that switch from it being a negative thing to being something to help you and guide you. Awesome. But we definitely already talked about the exposure to emerging authors and publishers. I guess if you had anything else, like, is that leveling the playing field, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's good on some degrees, but also maybe a bit more of a negative on some degrees. So I don't know how familiar you are with the trad publishing world.
Not 100%.
Okay, so basically how it used to work is you would hopefully find a book agent and you would have someone on your behalf send the book out to a bunch of publishers. I think what's happening now is you're seeing a lot more of like indie published books getting picked up by trad publishing. So it's almost like they've gotten like, it's gotten easier for them because they can see it's less of a risk. They can go and see, okay, this book did really well. We want to pick up the rest of the series. So then they republish the first book and then traditionally publish the rest of the series. So it's just a different format, I guess. But I think it makes it a little bit harder for emerging authors to get trad published right away. But also you have the option to get indie published. But then it kind of like links back to the issue with Amazon and that kind of being the main platform for indie publishing. So they have such a monopoly that with this current situation, the way that things are working, I think it would be harder for us to kind of break down that wall because there's just not really any other like platforms, I guess, in that sense that are as accessible to readers, especially with like Kindle Unlimited. Like that has changed the game for a lot of readers, like having that catalog of basically thousands of books that you can read and you pay $10 a month.
That's crazy.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I was kind of thinking, but yeah, if you're locked in for that 6 months or that year, that makes it a lot harder. Oh, you can at least like show, okay, look what I can do, and then get picked up by a traditional publisher. But yeah, if you're locked in with Amazon, that's not really an option. Oh, I thought this was something cool. I need to go back and look who said this quote. I believe it was a teacher or like a minister of education, but talking about how BookTok is increasing the desire to read outside the classroom.
yes, 100%.
Is great. Like we saw a really big decline in reading. Like when I was like much younger in elementary, middle school, I think it was much more popular to be big readers. And then by the time I was leaving high school, it's like nobody read anymore, or it was very niche. Yeah,
totally. I would agree. Like when I was in high school, I feel like reading was pretty niche too. Like I didn't know a lot of people who read. I think it is a very good thing. But also, I was in Indigo yesterday and there was like these 10-year-old girls picking up romance books. I was like, put those down. What are you doing?
something else.
Because like I've read, I look at the cover and I'm like, I know what that's about. Oh my God. So I think there's a little bit of trouble on that sense of things because we are pushing so many romance books and stuff like that. Like, don't get me wrong. There are tons of YA books out there that are amazing and fabulously written and they just don't have that content. But I do wish that we were a little bit more cautious on how we were marketing books, I guess, for the darker side of romance, especially with youth, because there are so many people reading them now. Like, I had one of my 15-year-old hosts come up to me a few years ago and like, I just finished Haunting Adeline. And I was like, oh God, like that, it's a very dark book. So it's just lots of stuff like that. So I feel like it is great that people are getting a little bit more engaged in reading. I do worry about mental health a little bit with some of the darker themes because I'm an adult. Like I know what I can handle. I know where my triggers are. I don't really have any, but like just I know myself and I know what I'm okay with reading and what I'm not okay with reading. And I feel like when you're like 14 or 15 and you're reading like really dark books like that, you don't really know how that's going to affect your brain, I guess. And we really do reflect the media we consume. Like when I was watching Euphoria a million years ago, I was so like dark and depressed and it really affected my mood. So books do that too. So I think it's really good that we see more engagement from like younger readers. Just wish that we maybe weren't like pushing into like the adult books and stuff like that. And there needs to be maybe a little bit more like lines on where the media is, even just how it's kept on bookshelves. Like maybe more of a divide.
I've seen other things online about this like shrinking preteen sort of market and what they're catering to, like that pre 10, 11, 12, 13. I don't know, maybe in the bookstores you notice it. You're probably out of that age category now, but is there less books for those age groups?
So we've kind of, from when I was younger and now, we've changed, not me, the community has changed kind of the categories a little bit more. And they've made them a little bit more narrow for sure. I kind of read any age group for the most part. Like I don't read a ton of like preteen books anymore, but I mean I read the new Percy Jacksons when they come out because I loved them when I was younger. We have kind of a new category. So when I was a kid and I was reading, we had like adult books and then we had young adult books, but we've kind of created this new genre that is called new adult. So like NA books, and that's kind of between the like 18 to 23 age range in my opinion.
Okay.
And then adult books kind of go a little bit older than that. Not that you can't read either of them, but it's just kind of like the age range. Like if you're talking about Zodiac Academy or books that are like kind of set at college, like I would say those are like new adult over adult books. And because of this change, I think that we are seeing a little bit less coming out in the YA sphere, which then means that they've just shifted things. And like another component of that is romance is the biggest content, like it's carrying the publishing industry. Like billions of dollars go to romance books every year versus fantasy or nonfiction or anything like that. Like print has been kind of hanging on by a bit of a thread for a while, and romance stimulates that because traditionally that's what people want to read. So I think that now with like BookTok and all of this emerging, we're seeing more romance books coming out, which means that maybe people who would have written something different will now be kind of focusing a little bit more on the romance aspect of things. So I think in that component, you do see a little bit less in those age ranges just because people are focused on other things. There are other like younger romances coming out too, like Closed Door, like high school age and such. But I'm not as familiar with that because I don't like.
That's totally fair. Yeah. I guess the last thing was sort of movie and TV adaptations from books, and if BookTok's sort of fueling that market and how you feel about it. Is that exciting? Do you think it's ruining certain series?
I don't think that movies and books or anything, like, I don't think it ever is ruining it. I think that if anything, they're getting more exposure. And I mean, for the most part, I think that authors deserve to be given everything. Like they've put their heart and soul into something. So I think it's great if it gets picked up for a movie because it just makes their media more consumable to everybody. Because there are some people still who don't like to read. But maybe if you watch something you really like, you're gonna be like, wow, there's a book too. And then that can trigger people and kind of stimulate more readers almost in that sense. Like I feel like a lot of people go out and watch the Hunger Games and they're like, wow, these are great. Like there's books. So maybe they'll read the books because they really liked the movie. So I never think that it's a bad thing. There's a lot of like discourse online about how people are worried that they're going to ruin certain characters or it's not going to be cast properly. And there is a lot of drama around Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us and just the way the movie was marketed and maybe how the characters were portrayed. I didn't personally watch it. I tend to boycott Colleen Hoover. I don't agree with a lot of the things that she does and such like that. So I don't really have an opinion on it. Just basically like what I've seen from like what other people have said. And it also depends. Like there are some adaptations, obviously, they're kind of going to be a bummer. Like I know when I was younger, Percy Jackson wasn't a very popular adaptation when they did the movies. I personally liked them. It didn't bother me, but I read the books because I liked the movies. You know what I mean? Like I feel like there's a lot of that when you like cross those two barriers between books and movies. I really enjoyed Daisy Jones and the Six, which was on Prime Video. That came from a book. I thought they did a great job. And I think it would have been a daunting task too, because Taylor Jenkins Reid kind of like wrote lyrics and like to the songs that she was talking about in the books. And they kind of had to create a whole album based off of like book quotes. So I think they did a really great job. on doing that. I know some people will complain, but people will always complain. Like, you're always going to have, objectively, yes, the book is always better because you're a reader. Obviously, that's the media you prefer, so obviously it's better for you. Whereas some people prefer movies. So it's great to see it. They've been talking about an ACOTAR TV adaptation for a long time too. I don't know if that will happen though. There's a lot of controversy around it because people are so attached to those characters that you'd have to cast it very well. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of drama. And honestly, I think that BookTok and like reader spaces are pretty powerful in those things because people will change their minds. Like, Colleen Hoover was publishing a coloring book based off of It Ends With Us a few years ago, probably around the same time she got the movie deal. And most of us thought it was in pretty poor taste, considering, I don't know if you know what the content or what the book's about. It's a pretty popular book, but it deals with like sexual abuse and relationships and domestic abuse. And in what world are you publishing a coloring book about it? And everybody on the internet was saying, are you kidding? And then it got pulled. So same thing happened recently with Sophie Lark. She had her new series coming out and she had a pretty racist comment in it, and ARC readers clocked it really early, and I'm pretty sure that the publisher ended up pulling the series. So I think that there's a lot of power on that spot of the internet because they hold people accountable. You can't really get away with the same things that you could before, like in publishing spheres. Now with like reviews and discussions so easily had between people, like you can figure out, like one person puts on threads, oh, I saw this on a book, like what's going on there? And then other people start to talk about it, and then all of a sudden it becomes a big discussion. And I think that's good because it's really important to be talking about those things and understanding like the content and holding authors and also other reviewers and readers accountable for their actions and how they're doing things. So I think that it's movie and TV adaptations at this point can be daunting because of that. If
that
you
power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think like I've seen a lot of things in that sphere happening. So
yeah, I think it's really neat. That's a good point though, of watching the movies or the TV shows and getting people to start reading too. The few series that I've read and then watched the shows, I've always just done it book first. But yeah, that's a really good point. Maybe that'll get people reading if they know what to expect, and the author's vision can be created in such a different way. I guess my last note of what you had just said too about the power of BookTok's kind of been a major thread throughout this. I think it's really neat how it can have both like a positive feedback to authors of keeping them accountable, but also just lifting up the good ones that are doing everything great, which is really nice. Did you have any final thoughts or words about everything we've talked about?
Honestly, I am very grateful I'm glad that I finally decided to make the jump because I have so much fun with it. I love talking about books. I love reading books. We're going book shopping after this. Like, awesome. It's just what I do. And it's become such a big, like, intrinsic part of me overall. Like, I've always been a reader, but now it is my life goal to get as many people reading as possible. Like, I take pride in, I'll spend an hour trying to curate like a list of book recommendations for somebody because they say, this is what I like. Can you help me find something? And it's just like having that, or just people asking me on the internet too. Like, it just feels like it's such a compliment, I guess, that people trust me to tell them what they should read and giving my thoughts on it, and they will go and read it. I'll text my mom or I'll text my sister and be like, hey, I just read this. You have to go read it. It's amazing. And it's one of the highest forms like of flattery and like the biggest compliment for me to be like, hey, this is really good. You should go read it. And people trusting my opinion on that, because honestly, books are expensive. Even if you're buying ebooks or picking up the print copy, that's hard-earned money. So the fact that people would trust my opinion on what I think that you should spend your money on or what you should read, it's pretty crazy to me when you think about it, I guess, in that. Even if I'm getting like lower engagement or a post doesn't do as well, like that could be like even if it's 3 or 4 people who decided to pick up a book because I said it, like that
That's
feels
so
kind of
cool.
crazy,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, I will continue along what I've been doing, and I don't see myself ever like stopping, I guess. I think it's so nice too because there's no like age range on it or anything. Like I can just like there's so many different kinds of people and age groups and ethnicities and different life experiences who are all reviewing books, and it's just really nice to like be able there's no end date. I can just keep doing it as long as I want, which is really
It's
cool.
fun. Yeah. Kind of feel the same way about podcasting. It's like a fun outlet. And if you're helping people, I like the idea too of, okay, maybe it's 10 people, but imagine there's 10 people in a room, like listening to you talk or listening to you share about books. Like that's 10 people that took time to listen to you. That's so
100%.
awesome.
Like it's just never about like how much reach you could get. And like honestly, like at this rate, like that's not even why I do it. Like I have people that I actively engage with, and obviously like I put in the effort and I engage back and I work on like the algorithm and my SEO and I learn all of the social media marketing tools. But if anything, it's just given me tools to do my job better and to understand the internet and be able to inform people a little bit better on it as well. So I think that it's crazy that we have this device that we can talk to hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people around the world, and you can just get your name out there. And the fact that people will put value on things you have to say is kind of crazy.
Yeah. I think that's such a great place to end it. That's such a good point. Thank you, Sydney, for coming on
Thanks
Social
for having
Sleuth
me.
and teaching me all about BookTok. That was great.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you to Sydney for chatting with me about BookTok. You can catch more from me at KennyC402 on Substack, where I post some written articles, and you can find every episode of this podcast there. Anyways, thank you for listening to Social Sleuth. Keep sleuthing.